Hi everyone, my name is Peyton Baker. Today I'm going to be telling a story about breastfeeding. This story is going to allow us a better understanding of where around the world breastfeeding is prevalent and when those females breastfeed in those countries. So as you can see here in this model, women around the world are breastfeeding more often when their babies are 0 to 1 month old. This also displays the amount of people that are doing it in each country. So each of these dots represent a nation around the world and the amount of women that breastfeed exclusively between the ages of 0 to 1 month old. Moving along, then you will see that women decreasingly exclusively breastfeed whenever their babies are between 2 to 3 months old. This is true around the world. As you can see, these numbers have significantly decreased from the previous numbers, and this entire circle has become smaller than the one shown in the first slide. Then we will see that when babies become the ages of 4 to 5 months old, the numbers again significantly decrease in the amount of women that exclusively breastfeed their children. This tells a story that though the amount of women that breastfeed within each nation differs, around the world, all females that exclusively breastfeed do so more often when their babies are from 0 to 1 month, and they start decreasing the amount that they're exclusively breastfeeding by the time that their baby is 4 to 5 months old. So what does this tell us about these women? So remember that all of these dots represent a nation around the world, and the bigger the dot, the more females that are breastfeeding within that country. So let's take a look at a better graphic display of those nations that have a higher amount of women in them that are breastfeeding. So each of these boxes represent a nation, and the size and the color of those boxes represent the amount of women that are breastfeeding within that country between their babies' ages of 1 to 5 months. So Peru has the highest amount of women that breastfeed exclusively between their babies' ages of 0 to 5 months. Where on this graph is the United States? So the United States is actually right down here. It's interesting that the United States has such a low number of women that breastfeed exclusively compared to other nations around the world. So when you start looking further into this data, you'll notice that the majority of these nations that have a higher population of women that are breastfeeding exclusively within their child's first few months most of these nations have a smaller GDP, and so I want to look further into how a nation's income and the national average income affects women's decision on whether or not they breastfeed. So, taking a further dive into this train of thought, I broke the data up into balls of those nations that are considered lower middle income nations, low income nations, upper middle income, and also high income nations. So this data tells us that the majority of women that breastfeed exclusively from 0 to 5 months old come from those nations that are considered lower middle income nations and low income nations. And actually, the smallest percentage of women that breastfeed exclusively are in those high income nations. So, some reasons that could be behind this is reasons from the CDC that states that women may have some issues with lactation and latching. There may be concerns about infant nutrition and weight. A mother may be concerned about taking medications while breastfeeding. A mother may also have unsupportive work policies and lack of parental leave. I know this can be especially true for a lot of women throughout the United States, a nation that would fall under that high-income nation. There may also be cultural norms and lack of family support, and there may also be unsupportive hospital practices and policies. One also has to take into account that in higher income nations, they have more governmental support, such as in the United States, they have WIC programs where mothers are able to get formula paid for through the government. And these all may be indications to show why it's so disproportionate among nations on the amount of women that are breastfeeding exclusively. The women in the lower middle income nations and the low income nations may not have a different option other than to breastfeed. But it may just come down strictly to a cultural matter. I know a lot of people in the United States disagree with breastfeeding and would prefer to have their babies bottle fed rather than having them breastfed. But really, these are all just ideas on explaining why these numbers are so disproportionate among different nations, among the nation's incomes, but also throughout the baby's first few months. I hope that you have found this information as interesting as I have. Thank you so much.